Well, hi everybody. I'm so delighted that you're here, and I'm also delighted to introduce Julie Blyfield. I think it was about 3 years ago I was perusing Sharon Cranston's books at the Symposium when I saw peeking out at me a beautiful cover filled with artworks of ethereal form, striking colors, and dynamic textures. I knew I had to get my name in that one right away. Opening to the inside cover, I discovered that this was the work of Julie Blyfield, chaser and metalsmith extraordinaire from Australia. Here we are, years later, and through the magic that is the Seattle Metals Guild Symposium, Julie Blyfield is presenting. I have had the privilege of hosting Julie and sharing her passion, which is new for me, of Vegemite with egg and toast. Along with presenting her work and her life, we have the unique opportunity to see several of her remarkable pieces close up upstairs in the cases in the lunchroom. Please take the time to see her work and the work of all our presenters on display. Julie has come to us flush from winning the Waterhouse Natural History Art Prize, South Australian Museum, Adelaide, South Australia, her hometown. She has been shortlisted for the Brit Insurance Design of the Year Award 2011 for Collectors Kai Lu Exhibition, the Design Centre, London, United Kingdom. Her work is in the collections of the National Gallery of Australia, Art Gallery of South Australia, South Australian Museum Waterhouse Art Prize Collection, Anne and Gordon Samstag Museum of Art, University of South Australia, the Art Centre, Melbourne, Victoria, the Queensland, Art Gallery, Brisbane, Queensland, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and in many more distinguished collections around the world. She has just had a 20-year retrospective titled Julie Blyfield, Contemporary Jewelry and Objects, 1990 to 2010, at Forum Gallery, Perth, Western Australia, and has exhibited in 17 group shows in 2011 alone. Considering she walked off the plane from Sydney just a ball of fire, I can see how she might manage all these demands. We are thrilled that Julie has agreed to teach a workshop on the botanical landscape, sketching, maquette making, and chasing on October 21st through 23rd in North Seattle Community College. We have a few spots left. Please see me if you're interested. I highly recommend this workshop. And please join me in welcoming Julie Blyfield.
Couldn't find my glasses. Thank you. And I just wanted to say thank you to Megan, thank you to Candice, and to the Seattle Metal Guild. It's great to be here. And I've had a great time so far. I've been to the zoo, I've been to Hardware, which was fantastic. So I've already purchased within about 2 seconds of walking through the door. So yeah, it's fantastic, so thank you. My talk will cover a little bit of a fair bit of my own work, but I'm going to start off talking a bit about the Adelaide scene, because Seattle and Adelaide have actually got a lot of connections, I've found out through talking to Megan. We're a city of about 1 million people, and so is Seattle, and we've got quite a strong arts community. We have public art and a major craft centre. So I'm just going to show you a few and talk a little bit about that to start with, and then talk about my own work in the second part. I'm sorry, but I will read it, and I'll try and spontaneously throw in some little jokes along the way. Okay, so this is my studio. One of Australia's leading contemporary jewellers, Margaret West, recently wrote, "To be a studio jeweller is to be both a dreamer and a maker, a poet and an engineer." She says it's associated with the physicality of the body, the psychology of human behaviour and emotion, the perception and projection of self. So what got me started? When I grew up in the 50s and the early 60s, before we had television, the internet, faxes, mobile phones and all the latest gadgets, I spent a lot of time outside in the open air, in the garden, building and creating from whatever I could find in Dad's shed, much to his horror. I'd watch my father at the kitchen table, completely absorbed making tiny components from bits of balsa wood for his small wooden ships. Working from scaled plans and from his imagination, he would reproduce his old sailing ships at miniature scale. Mum would be in the background complaining about the Tarzan's grip spilling all over his good pants and the kitchen table. There was no designer workshop for him. Repairing things instead of replacing things, was part of the culture of the time. This is a strong memory of my childhood, and it's only now in my 50s that I can appreciate and this influence even more. I knew quite early in my life I would somehow have a career in the arts. I first began my interest in jewellery making when I was studying to become a secondary school art teacher. And when I completed my diploma of teaching back in 1979 at then Underdale College, the course was very rich in the way we studied the various media and art disciplines, including painting, printmaking, drawing, sculpture, photography, hard fabrications, which included a very, very small component of jewellery making. And I also studied soft fabrications or textiles. We had a little taste of everything. I had a sound and broad arts education. It was the days when there was no consideration for health and safety in the workplace. There were no restrictions on media, work hours, process, or materials. It was very creative, open and free in approach. How things have changed. I grew to love the detail of making small and quite intricate pieces. I went off to my first art teaching appointment, and at nights my friend and I would make our jewellery and sell at the local fairs until we finally built up enough work for an exhibition, which was inspired by the local surrounding environment in the old copper mining area of Moonta and Wallaroo, which was about 2 hours north of Adelaide, where I was teaching at the time. Following the obligatory country service, I returned to Adelaide to teach, and it was here in the early 1980s that I undertook night classes and learnt the technique of repoussé. Repoussé, as you probably know, is a process of texturing when you anneal and texture metal using small steel chasing tools. I enjoy the way the metal moves and crimps in almost unpredictable ways as it work hardens, giving a feeling of the fragility and softness to the hard and cold material, almost transforming it to something else. This is a view of the South Australian Museum and some public artworks in the front and the River Torrens. And I put a map in here, sorry if it's a bit blurred because I downloaded it from the internet, but Adelaide's in the centre at the bottom. So just for those who don't know where it is. Living back in Adelaide in 1987, I joined Grey Street Workshop as an access tenant. Incidentally, Grey Street is a collectively run jewellery workshop in Adelaide and is now operating in its 26th year. It's where I spent my time after school and at weekends, making my jewellery. It was during this time that I learnt the ropes, so to speak, making work for exhibitions and retail outlets. Grey Street provided me with a place to work alongside other jewellers, share equipment and ideas. We learnt from each other. By 1989, I was invited to become a partner, and for 3 years we ran and established a gallery. This experience gave us all direct contact with our buyers and the general public, and an insight on how people select and commission work. We ran a modest exhibition program and supported students by hosting their gallery, a graduate exhibition. While we shared the roles of running the workshop, like shopping, banking, cleaning, well, not so much cleaning, but there was some cleaning, sitting in the gallery, and we regularly held meetings to ensure things ran like clockwork. Being part of the workshop and paying weekly rental ensured commitment and in some ways assisted me to continue to develop and to make my work through both the good and hard times. Throughout the time I was at Grey Street, we supported nearly 80 access jewellers who came from the TAFE colleges and universities in South Australia, from interstate universities and from overseas. Established jewellers came to work alongside of us, like-minded people in search of new experiences rather than operating as sole practitioners. I've mentored many young jewellers, both formally and informally, throughout my practice, and this is still an important part of my life as a jeweller today. I enjoy this contact and exchange, and hopefully I can pass on a few handy tips along the way. I'm currently mentoring a jeweller, Shauna Swanson from Tasmania, and Vanessa Williams in Adelaide. I meet with them regularly and we discuss all sorts of things, where their work's going, give them feedback, whatever they want to know, business sort of work or design sort of feedback. So it's a really nice and two-way process. It was after working at Grey Street for 23 years in this shared studio that I established my own independent studio in my garden, where I had more light and air and a view of the garden. Grey Street continues to survive today, and this is some of the work by the Access and partners of Grey Street Workshop that you can see up on the screen here. Adelaide experiences a Mediterranean climate, and it's a very small and affordable city, very livable as well, which is home to approximately, as Seattle is, about 1 million people. It has a lively art scene. It's a bit like a big country town, really. The city is nestled 25 minutes drive between the hills and the sea, with the River Torrens running through its core. It's the land of the Aboriginal inhabitants known as the Ghana people before white European settlement came in 1836. The city centre has a green belt around the edges, which creates a sense of space and openness to the landscape and helps keep it cool in the summer when the temperatures can rise to over 100 degrees. It's a great place to live, boasting an annual arts international festival showing dance, theatre, music, and SALA, or South Australian Living Arts Festival, which is held for 3 weeks in August each year. As a major part of the SALA celebration, an individual artist or craftsperson is awarded a monograph publication which celebrates their life and their work. This SALA initiative was the brainchild of a private gallery owner, Paul Greenaway, who was aiming to raise the profile of artists rather than sports people, because you all know that sports is so big in Australia, and now it's in its 11th year of operation. It's a lively time in Adelaide when artists show their work in cafes, pubs, galleries all around the city and take over all the regional venues. In fact, the program is so jam-packed now, about 3,000 exhibitors around the city and country areas, and it's very difficult to get around to see everything, but it's a great time in Adelaide when everyone comes out to celebrate. Another fantastic place in Adelaide is the Jam Factory, which you can see here. The Jam Factory is actually a craft centre, not a jam factory, and it has a 40-year history of training and representing crafts practitioners with its 4 gallery spaces and a newly renovated shop designed by a local furniture maker, Kai Lu. It has 4 training studios, including glass, metal, ceramics and furniture, where associates are put through their paces for a 2-year training program, working on Jam Factory projects for half of their week and their own practice for the rest of the time. Jam Factory also rents out independent studios to makers. It brings people from Australia, from around the world, and helps create a vibrant hub of creative people in Adelaide. Artists are generally very supportive of each other in Adelaide and the broader community. So it's a really nice thing. And when people usually first come, they say, oh, we're not going to stay here, it's so small, and they always end up staying because it's a great place to live. I work at my practice on a full-time basis, and I divide my time between making bodies of work for exhibitions. I make bread and butter work, like lots of earrings for retail outlets, and I make commission pieces for individual clients. As a sole maker, I organise my own administration and bookkeeping, and I usually work in a fairly regimented way, beginning around 9 o'clock and continue to the end of the day, treating my creative work a bit like a job. I found it's vital to take time to recharge the batteries, and I balance time for work, pleasure and exercise, ensuring I keep my body in tune with my work. I jump on my bike to get a breath of fresh air, to check the post and have a change of scene. I'm lucky I've found a job that I love, is challenging, inspiring and always different each day and every year. I try not to work at weekends. I enjoy catching up with friends, seeing movies and walking along the beach or around the neighbourhood and checking out the gardens. Because my work is represented by Australian and international galleries and agents such as Sharon, Cranston upstairs, I can manage to make a living from what I design, although it took me about 20 years to get to this position. And I've had to make some critical choices along the way. So going back in time, this is to 1992, I'd like to talk about some of these early experiences that informed my work. In the early 90s, it was 20 years ago now, I volunteered to work on a local archaeological dig at the old produce market at the east end of Adelaide. It was the middle of January, the hottest time of the year. It was hot, dirty and dusty work, sifting through the layers of the full summer sun. Under the watchful eyes of the archaeologists, we collected everything: shards of pottery, bits of pins, needles, buttons, broken jewellery pieces. Every skerrick was valued, collected, collated and accessioned onto sheets in an orderly fashion. It was important to document and record everything from the dig before it was covered in and turned into the very ugly city apartments which are there today. The collected fragments were worth little in terms of their material value, but they were there as a valuable record of our history and that period of time. And it was this direct experience of sifting and sorting through tiny fragments of our history that had been buried for over 100 years that inspired a body of work for one of my first solo exhibitions called Memento, Celebration and Sentimentality. I experimented with different materials and tried to capture the essence of what I had seen and experienced firsthand at the dig site. And this then laid the foundations for me to further investigate jewellery made in the time of Queen Victoria's reign and the wonderful, rich collections of sentimental and mourning jewellery from the mid to late 1800s. And in 1997, I was successful in securing funding from the Australia Council to take up a studio residency in the East End of London for 4 months, which was fantastic. In Australia, we're very fortunate to have state funding bodies, Arts SA, and national funding bodies, Australia Council, that support artists for exhibitions, for residencies, to buy materials, to produce catalogues, and this has really been crucial in my development of my career, being able to apply for funding from local and national funding. And philanthropy isn't such a commonplace in Australia as it is here in the States. It was while I was in the UK that I had the opportunity to see wonderful historic collections, and sorry, these were from old prints, so it was pre-digital days, from the Victoria and Albert Museum and the British Museum in London. I travelled to Scotland to see these pieces from the National Museum, and I was basically handed the key to the room, and they said, help yourself, look at the pieces, which was, for me, amazing and very exciting. There were just drawers and drawers of this sentimental mourning jewellery. So it was a fantastic opportunity for me, and it was sort of much better than looking in books, that I could actually turn pieces over and look at them and hold them in my hand. So it was fantastic. And these are some of my drawings and bits of photographs from that period of time. And a neck piece. And then following this time, I made some pieces, research from my own family history. And here are a few examples. This was taken from embroidery from my grandmother's, of nasturtiums actually, and I metaphorically unpicked all her stitches and then chased over her stitch marks and made a series of brooches and then laid them out in the same pattern as her embroidery. Some neck pieces that were also produced for that period of time, made from sweet pea seeds. I had to phone around Australia to find nice plump sweet pea seeds, and one seed merchant wouldn't sell me the seeds because I wasn't going to plant them. I was actually going to turn them into jewellery. So I also made these couple of brooches, and they were sort of symbolised pieces for my great aunts, who actually immigrated to the States. They kept bees and ran a petrol station. I thought, they sounded like interesting characters. Mentors and mentoring, as I said before, has had a significant influence on my practice. As a maker, it's important to continually grow, and so I think it's also important to provide support for contemporaries in our field. In 2003, I'd reached the stage where I wanted to challenge myself and learn how to make larger and more complex and time-consuming pieces using the technique of metal raising and combining it with chasing. I approached Frank Bauer, who's a German silversmith who now lives in Adelaide, and Frank will be 70 next year, and sought his assistance in teaching me this technique. Again, I received Arts SA funding to pay Frank to work alongside of him in his studio, and he generously taught me traditional metal raising, sharing his lifelong skills and knowledge. He taught me how to make the metal stakes, which was not much fun, but it taught me a lot. A lot of grinding, sanding, polishing, hard task indeed, but it was very, he was a fantastic teacher. He is a fantastic teacher. I continued to look for new ideas, and we've got a wonderful Museum of Economic Botany in the Adelaide Botanic Gardens, and I went in there and I drew all the seed pods and collections that they had on display there. And I developed, this is my usual process of drawing and then making some paper models. And I worked towards a body of work which are held in Gallery Funaki, and some of you might have heard of that, which is a small, intimate gallery in Melbourne. Melbourne's a bit of a mecca for jewellery galleries. There's about, I think 4 major jewellery galleries, and they're quite sort of competitive. They all sort of show different types of work though. I think someone said there were about 300 jewellers living in Melbourne, which is quite a lot for the size of the 3-point-something million. Anyway, this is some of the work that I made after working with Frank. From pure silver, hammered up and then chased. Collection of vessels. The bottles took me ages to do. Some oxidised copper as well. Some detail of the chasing. And some brooches at the top, and pure silver neck pieces at the bottom. It was during this same year that I was selected to be part of a 3-month jewellery exchange residency where 8 Australian jewellers went to the UK to work in different locations, and 8 British jewellers came to different capital cities in Australia. I went to Lincolnshire and worked in the P Room, the P Room Craft Centre, which was originally a pea sorting factory. It was a very beautiful little building in quite a remote village. It was while I was there, though, that I had the chance to also go down to London to the Natural History Museum and to the Herbarium Cambridge in Edinburgh, where I studied plant collections of plants. And you can see the preparator here in London, and she's just gluing down the plants onto the sheets. And this provided me with wonderful inspiration, obviously, for my work. I was able to see plants that were over 100 years old. These daffodils were really old. And while I was in the P Room, although it wasn't set up really for making jewellery, I just really played around and made some little prototypes. I did take my small pitch bowl and some of the chasing tools, but it was really just a time to experiment and try some new ideas. I started introducing colour into my work. I had some little humble paints that I used. Whilst at Grey Street, we often celebrated milestones together by holding special group exhibitions. On the occasion of our 20th anniversary in 2005, I travelled with the other partners, Catherine Truman, Sue Lorraine, Leslie Matthews, to Gallery Ra in Amsterdam. This gallery was established by Paul de Rey, which you probably know, in the 1970s, and it's about to celebrate its 35th year. And it's a very important place for showing jewellery in Europe today. And it was for this exhibition that I decided to make a new group of iconic Australian flora pieces inspired by the desert to take to the land of the tulips. The pressed desert plant series of brooches and neck pieces evolved from looking at a wonderful collection of 100-year-old pressed desert plants collected by a Lutheran missionary, Pastor Johann Reuter, from the remote desert area in the northeast of South Australia around 1900. Up around here, a day and a half to get up there driving. And that's the sort of landscape. Did you hear that? Yeah. The map, that's just a map of the location. And this is the old album from about 1900. I visited the museum archive where I photographed and sketched these beautiful old fragile plants. You could see that plants had actually stained and embossed the pages. I had to really carefully turn over each page. They were beautiful, very fragile, and they'd been labelled with the indigenous plant names as well. And these were the pieces that I made. And I decided that my Pressed Desert Plant series had to be quite soft and muted colours, like the pieces that in the original album. Actually, some of these pieces are about to be shown in Washington, DC, in the Forces of Nature exhibition, which is opening in mid-November. So that's really nice. They're having another airing. And some neck pieces. By luck or fate, sometimes you can be in the right place at the right time. It was while I was exhibiting in Europe in 2005 that I was invited to spend a week working in a small village of Travassos in the northeast of Portugal, where the tradition of filigree is still practiced by traditional and more contemporary jewellers. It was again a wonderful opportunity to work in a living jewellery museum alongside other European jewellers, and also to meet the Senor, the man on the left here, who was once a renowned goldsmith himself. We immersed ourselves and set to work using they said you can use any of the old equipment or tools from the museum. And we worked away at our benches, and local people from the villages came in and watched us as we work. It was fantastic. And they also had a part of the museum was set up with wonderful gold pieces. You can see how, how the tools have been well used. The Senor generously came in at sunrise each morning to fire up the old forge. The sounds of filing, tapping, hammering sung out through the museum. It came alive again. As a memento of the week in residence, he had the little aluminium plaques with their names made and attached them to all the benches. I was sort of horrified that he was putting aluminium or aluminum, you see, plates on these beautiful old benches. And while we were there, we had the chance to visit these two brothers that were working in this tiny Dickensian workshop. And you can see the glasses, 2 pairs of glasses they're wearing. Their beer bottles were chucked in the corner. It was fantastic, and they were making these amazing pieces. There he is with his blowtorch. Anna Campos she runs the metal department in Oporto. So some of her students go and work with these two brothers. But, she was fairly short, but that neck piece was about that tall. Very fine work. And they were about 2 centimetres wide, those beads. Incredible work. And this tiny little tin at the end they finally brought out the gold pieces so we could have a look at them. So the students from Oporto are still currently being mentored by these two brothers, which is fantastic. And when they're not working on their jewellery, they're out in the fields which surround the museum. So it's great, really exciting. So how do I maintain my passion and inspiration after 25 years? For me, it's definitely the ability to experiment and try something new that I enjoy. And I decided in 2008 to go out at a bit of a limb. I attended a textile workshop with Sandy Elvard, the woman on your right there, and she was working in natural materials and teaching basketry techniques. So it's difficult to imagine now because you've probably heard about our recent floods. But I went along, at that time we were actually in really severe drought, and the trees all around us were dying, and the landscape was quite parched. And so I began collecting dead tree sticks and bits and pieces from the neighbourhood in our backyard, and trying with the idea of making them into some jewellery pieces. I stripped the bark off the sticks and caught out the centres to make beads and painted them. Fashion statement here in the desert, collecting sticks. Megan said to me, "What's that on your head?" I said, "It's a fly net." You don't have those problems here. So they're pretty bad up there. So we went up to the desert in the winter, because in the winter it's beautiful in the desert. Again, back up to the area where I showed you earlier on the map. Amazing nest in one of the trees up there. And when I came back, I also went and looked at collections in the Aboriginal body adornments in the museum, just to look at how, not to copy these pieces, but to look at how they'd been assembled and put together. And it gave me a remarkable understanding and insight of, or maybe understanding more than insight, of how you could actually work with natural materials with no technology, no tools, no power, and actually make beautiful, exquisite pieces. And these are some of the things I saw in the museum there. And I also felt it was the time for me to expand from just using metal to try using non-precious and very light and recyclable materials. So I just began playing with string and sticks and mucking around. Discovering my visual language in natural materials I found challenging and made me focus in a different sort of way. And I produced an exhibition which I called Natural Selection, and these are some of the pieces from that for that exhibition. These are quandong seeds and acacia. I've written the materials down there, you can read it. A collection of brooches. There is some metal components in there. Catherine Truman, when I was working at Grey Street, she uses wood carving, so she gave me a few tips on how to join all the wooden pieces together. And some neck pieces. And the sticks with the gold leaves. And this is how it looked in Gallery Whanaki in Melbourne. It was also at the same time that I was invited to make a piece, a large silver piece, to be in a metalsmithing exhibition in the Netherlands. And I couldn't really say no to it. So I fabricated this large bowl and called it Drought. And there was a minimum size, so the bowl was sort of about that size. And the Art Gallery of South Australia just purchased that, which was really nice. Commissions and collaborations have played an important role in building new professional relationships and in developing new directions and skills. In 2009, I was commissioned to create a new piece, it could be anything, for the Performing Arts Centre in Melbourne, based on the beautiful costumes from Dame Nellie Melba, who lived from 1861 to 1931. And this newspaper article recently, it was from May the 20th this year, it was her 150th anniversary, so I cut that out. It was nice to see that in the paper in Canberra. I realised it was sort of enormous privilege, but also quite confronting, being asked to make something to respond to such a famous person's work. So I travelled to Melbourne. This is not Dame Nellie Melba in this box. And it's one of her costumes. I spent a considerable time with the specialist curator and her assistant to study the beautiful costumes, which they themselves hadn't seen because they were all wrapped up like this, and they, had white gloves. It was very precious. They took a long time to unwrap them all. They'd been stored away for years in archival tissue. And so I took heaps of photographs documenting all the detail of her costumes. And then back in my Adelaide studio, I spent the next 2 weeks or so further engaged in sketching and making models and playing around, adjusting my designs. And that was the dress that I actually chose because I thought there was so much information there. I just thought I'll just choose one piece to make something about. And I remember it was a real struggle for a while, and then I thought, well, I'll just decide this Romeo and Juliet dress, which was from about 1900, was beautiful silk material. Melba often used couturiers for her work, such as Worth of Paris and F.J.L. Wilson of London, although there was no label in this sewn into this garment, so they couldn't verify whether it had been actually designed by someone. The delicate peach and pale green silk was finely beaded with faux pearls, stones, and decorated with metallic thread. And it was ironic, really, because the metallic thread was actually tearing the silk material and causing damage. And I ended up making this big neck piece using roller printing as well as chasing, and then stitching some little mother of pearl seed pearls onto it. And the links were made from mother of pearl shell, which I got from the top of Western Australia in a place called Willie Creek, which is a nice name. I wanted the piece to sort of make reference to form and movement and be quite theatrical and have the compatible use of pure sterling silver and the lustre of the pearl shell. Another opportunity for doing some different sort of work came along when Kai Lu, the furniture maker in the photograph there in the front left, he was the Sala recipient in 2010, selected for a monograph. And for his exhibition, because it's usually you have an exhibition associated with the monograph production, he invited a group of craftspeople to collaborate with him on his furniture. And so I made some handles for one of his cabinets, and there's his cabinet makers. It was made from sterling silver. We went to the Botanic Gardens and we were rummaging around trying to find the right two gum leaves to be wanted. So people thought, well, I don't know what we were up to in the bushes, but and that was the cabinet when it was finished. And then, as I said, Megan said, it ended up in the shortlisted for the British Design Museum Awards, and I think that's just finished in London. And there it is in the museum. Travelling to different landscapes and exploring new environments, such as the South Australian desert or the coast of Kangaroo Island, has had an enormous influence on my work, and is something that both my partner Chris and I do and enjoy doing together, so I think that's calling work and pleasure. These are some of the images from Kangaroo Island, where we go at Christmas time on the southeast coast at D'Estuary Bay. Some of the patterns and colours. And then just some of the paper maquettes and sketches. Workbench. I've got a nice plumber's vise that I use to hold my pieces while I'm texturing them. High tech on a brick in the garden or in a bucket of sand. It's very low tech. And as Megan also said, I had a 20-year show of my work from 1990 to 2010, and I found when we were up in the desert a little shard of ceramic, and it had beautiful sort of leaf pattern on it, and I decided for my display I wanted it all open, everything was wired down, but all of the curves could interlock, so that just display could be arranged in any sort of combination because all the curves fitted into each other. And obviously people had a great time trying things on, but nothing was stolen, because when I came back at the end of the exhibition, things, were unhooked. So that was the exhibition from Perth, and they generously form in Perth, paid for the catalogue, let me design my own display system, which was all demountable, and gave me a small artist fee to make some new work too. So that was, and then it was also on at the Jam Factory, and this is the Jam Factory, one of the gallery spaces there. These are some of the pieces that I made from this period of time, and actually these are the pieces that I put into the Waterhouse Art Award, so they were collected by the South Australian Museum. Some pieces, which is the top left and top couple are upstairs. Neck piece. People were asking me about what paints I use. I just go to the hardware and get spray paint. Nothing special. It squirts from Bunnings. I use an undercoat and then spray paint. I set it up just in a box on some plastic in the garden with a mask on. So it's very low tech really. And then once I put on my colour, I let it set quite hard and then pumice it back and then oxidise it. And the piece, I really notice how the pieces change once they've got the colour on them. Sometimes I just like to leave them just the silver neck pieces, oxidised silver. Also, these are some photos of Kangaroo Island after the bushfire, and these inspired some of my pieces as well. And another group of works that I made called Windfall, a series of sculpture works which was purchased by another museum in Adelaide, and they're going to make a special recess in a wall with spotlighting on them. So that's really nice that they'll be kept in there as well. Participating in group and themed exhibitions is a challenge and can often have benefits of moving my work into other places and new directions and broaden my practice as well. And this year I was invited to be in a large group exhibition curated by Queensland's Kirsten Fitzpatrick, and it was called Tinker Tailor Soldier Sailor, 100 women, 100 jewellers, 100 stories. So she asked 100 jewellers in Australia to make a piece about a woman, 100 women from one woman from Australia, either from politics or art or science background. And I was given Margaret Preston, who's Australian. She did printmaking and a painter, and she lived from 1865 to 1963. I've always loved her print, so that was a nice person to get, and that was the brooch I made. And I happened to have the same rock lily in my garden, which was flowering not long ago. Also, I decided this year I'd go in a few of the Asian competitions that are around. If I've got the time, I sort of like to do that as well, because it's a good chance to make some other pieces. So I made these cups and again ordered some more mother of pearl shell from Willie Creek, and I made some leaf-shaped shells, and that's the base for the cups. And they're entered in an exhibition in Korea. And some brooches I sent to Japan. Another set of cups and sort of sculptural leaf forms around them, called a centrepiece. Some of the pieces that are upstairs. And I thought I'd just finish here. I've just got a few images to finish, but I'd like to finish by saying all of these places, people and opportunities that I've spoken about have together sparked my passion and enthusiasm for designing and making my work. And I feel I'm pretty lucky to have had all those opportunities. It's a wonderful career. It's very unpredictable, but I think this actually helps keep me going and keeps me on my toes, so it's fantastic. And this is an image from Central Australia of the Olgas, taken in winter at the Flinders Ranges, which is about 5 hours drive north of Adelaide. Me in the desert after the big rains, and all the perfume was fantastic. And then after the big floods, all the water from Queensland came down through South Australia. And this is the same area where I'd collected the plants, and where the missionary had collected his plants, and it was all flooded this year. And that's it. Any questions? Didn't they inspire you to come to Australia? Yes. Whoops. I lost my bottle. Yeah. Yeah, I taught for 13 years in schools. I got to the point where I was sort of juggling, trying to do jewellery at weekends and after school and in between lessons. And I just decided in 1994 that was it. They had too many art teachers at secondary school level, so I decided they were offering little payout carrots. So I took it and I thought it's now or never. So I did it. But I have taught at the TAFE College in Adelaide as well, sometimes just a semester, usually with the third year students. And that's nice to do too, but I haven't this year, so no, not at the present. Yeah, next weekend, that's different. Yeah. Any more questions? Oh, the class. We're going to be doing some drawing, model making tools, and doing a bit of chasing, using botanical references. So I've got to go out and collect some plants. And there's still. Oh, Gage, help. Megan, what's it in? I only know 22. Yep. Yeah, and sterling silver. For brooches I use sterling. Pure silver's too soft. Copper, you can work with copper. Oh, I'm not for brooches, but I have raised copper and I've raised bronze, yep. I only use spray paint, it's a spray enamel paint, not enamelling, like proper kiln enamelling, yeah. So you're covering that, yep. Hey? Sacrilege. Yeah. Yes? I can't see.
Can you tell us more about how much you like hardware?
Oh, I loved it. I didn't even see, I've got to go back there, it's fantastic. Within about 2 minutes, wasn't it, I bought some pliers. And I thought, why am I buying more stuff? So I've got to go back and have a look. It's great. We've got nothing like that in Australia. So it was fantastic. But I love hardware shops anyway, so it's good. Yeah, I use a blue tack to mask out, or mask and tape. Yeah, blue tack, I love it. Yeah. So yes, do that. Any more questions? The Jam Factory, by the way, if you're interested in coming to work in Australia under that associate program, do call for people in October. And we have had people from the States come before, and they love it. So if you're looking for an amazing opportunity to work in a fantastic craft centre, in a really lively community, it's a great opportunity to come and do something like that. Okay. Thank you.